this is the third panel for Envisioning of Future of Education. And we have a very interesting set of panelists here. And I'm really, really excited to welcome each one of them. So when I founded Sparkling Minds, this is about 15 years ago, the intention was to reimagine education. That was the vision from the beginning. And the question that remains even today when we talk about education and envisioning the future of education is, why reimagine it? What has happened that is causing this thinking around reimagination? And one of the things that stands out is that the world in which our children are going to be living is no longer going to be familiar to us from the world that we came from. I'm going to give you a couple of statistics. The world our children are going to be inheriting, the world that we borrowed from them, has 6 out of 9 planetary boundaries that have already been breached. So our children are going to be walking into this world, and climate change and climate crisis is a reality for them. The age of AI is upon them. It's predicted that by 2050, 60% of jobs that we know today will be replaced. And the number of jobs that are going to get created need new skills. And our children are increasingly living in times of strife. There is a political tension, there is wars, and all kinds of things tearing the world apart with nothing setting them up to deal with that reality. So it brings us to the question, because this panel is about educators, what should educators do differently? And can educators still be the bearers of knowledge alone, or something needs to change? And what should that change really look like? And facilitation by educators for the children becomes the response to that question, because you no longer have the entire control on the knowledge that you're actually taking to the children. Children have to discover, have to empathize, build skills, collaborate, think, and all of this needs the role of the educator to shift into facilitation. So here we are, and we will start our panel with the first question going to Dr. Shinty, who actually educates the educators. How are you transforming the education that is being delivered in your college to cater to facilitation by the educators? That will be my first question.
Good afternoon. As is a teacher training institute, we train teachers. So we have in our curriculum, we have numerous innovative methods and approaches. We have 5E model, constructivism, inquiry training model, snowball method, jigsaw, then brainstorming, peer tutoring, team teaching, concept mapping, collaborative and cooperative learning, and many more, experiential learning and many more. So all these methods and approaches involve children actively, and the teacher is mere passive or just a facilitator. So if a teacher is using this very effectively, teacher's role is very minimal and the children are dominant in the class. We give them all this information theoretically with a lot of examples from every pedagogy subject, and we demonstrate this. We send these trainees to schools for their practice, and they spend nearly 3 months in school and they practice all these methods and approaches. We observe their classes, we give them feedback and suggestion if any improvement is required. This is what we do.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think the organizations that are working with educators, when they start shifting their thinking and are aligned that this is a need, the skill is a need, things start to move. That brings me to a very opposite view of the spectrum, homeschooling, right? Where the educator is everything around you, right? And the child-directed, child self-directed learning is happening. So I want to ask Sandhya, how is facilitation playing a role in homeschooling? And how do you use those to kind of build the curiosity and motivation in students?
Okay, thank you, Sreeja, and good afternoon, everyone. So when it comes to homeschooling, I know it's very different from a facilitator or an educator being there. Now, the first thing that many of us choose to homeschool is a child is innately curious. A child learns very naturally. Okay, so providing an environment for it is all that is necessary. We tend to, traditionally as schools where it was required, content transfer or knowledge transfer was more required back then, we would facilitate that. Versus today, as you rightly said, the present world and the future requires different skill sets. So in homeschooling, it's a lot easier than at school because the world is the learning space and it's all out there. But yes, as parents, we do need to be observant, nudge them, and provide those environment or those experiences. We don't need to do anything for that, but the observation and being able to ensure that they are in the right space at the right time, all those opportunities are available to them. That is what we do as homeschoolers. And I can tell you that the learning is immense. We do not work on academic goal sets, though I believe as an educator myself, I've worked in school spaces too. I believe that some basic academic skill sets need to be set up by the age of 12, 13. Reading, writing, comprehension, and arithmetic, basic arithmetic. And this can be built up in homeschooling. The advantage over a school is no learning goals at a certain age. And by this age, the child can work on it at their own pace. This is possible in homeschooling. So as a facilitator, that's all that I have also done. And I see many families doing the same thing.
Thank you, Sandhya. I think that's beautifully shared. That as a facilitator, primary role is to observe and establish the provocations at the right time so that the child can pick up and mold their innate curiosity in the right ways. So this is interesting, right? They don't have the pressure of the goals to be met year-wise. And then we have educators here who are following the primary and the middle school classes. I will refer to the language challenges first, right? So when you're working with children and you have to guide them in a certain way to kind of achieve the language milestones, which she's saying, reading, writing, comprehension of certain milestones have to be achieved. How do you facilitate and how do you manage those challenges?
So good afternoon, and it's definitely an honor and pleasure to be on this panel and with industry experts. And as an educator, the term itself is I was very happy when that term was used rather than teacher as a facilitator. So, which actually kind of resonates with what I talk to my students in my class as well. We're like, there's a big difference between literacy and education. So where we make it more holistic and how we change and all the other things that we bring in along with our academics is where we, you can consider education more complete. So, I don't want to talk too much about DPS because we just heard from Geeta ma'am, who's our, she's one of our guiding lights and our foundation for DPS. She's spoken about all the different initiatives that we have in the school. So I think she's the right person to speak about it. So the passion rings when she speaks about it. So I will just focus about what we deal with as in the classroom. I know we spoke about beyond the classroom, but we do have to come back to the classroom at some point. So, language is something very vital, very important for communication, but also something that we tend to take for granted. So what happens is I teach middle school. So by the time the child has finished primary, so we've learned your basic reading, speaking, and your basic skills have set in, your grammar rules have set in. So the child also is in a level where they think they know the language, right? So how do we deal with that and ensure that the learning continues, wherein they don't become very complacent? It's a very tricky. I teach grades 7, 8, and 9. So 7 is still okay, where they're open to learning. 8 is what I call the flip year, where you see them. That they want to start becoming like the older kids, so they want to test their freedom. That is the stage. And grade 9, by then they most of them start focusing on their higher studies. So language learning takes a back seat, because they think, I've had students actually say, ma'am, I'm not learning my English lessons because, I have to study science and math. That's a more important subject, right? I was focusing on that. So how do we, the biggest challenge that we have is how to make them realize that language skills and communication is something that is extremely crucial in today's world. Yes, one of the things that I tell my students is, you can be the best scientist, but if you cannot get your message across as to what you've invented or discovered, nobody's going to know who you are. So that comes back to your language skills. So that's one thing, dealing with the students. The other challenge is we have a lot of tech savvy parents as well. So I'm a class teacher for grade 8. So when I talk to them or I have some feedback to give the parents, they're always like, ma'am, English is okay, but I'm more worried about the math or the science, right? Why my child is not able to do well. So I have to break it down for them as well. So my approach to it is that, is it that your child is having difficulty in word problems in math? Okay, and the parents just looks at me, all quizzical and says, how did you know? I'm like, language skills. So I don't know if there are any math teachers around here. So I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong. So I think word problems is a phobia to a lot of students, right? Why do we suffer though we have all the information in the problem? Because you've not learned how to retrieve the information that you've got. So that is where your language skills comes back again, where it becomes absolutely essential. So this is something that, we have to, it's a challenge that we deal with day in, day out. And of course, thanks to ChatGPT, everybody thinks you just have to type it in there and you've got the answers, right? But again, I work with students as well as the parents in making them understand ChatGPT definitely is smarter than all of us, but what it throws back at you may not be what you want to convey to the world. So for that, learning has to set in. You have to realize, and analysis has to happen on different levels. That is what we do in school. So language is important. So that's what it is all about.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think as a facilitator, our role is double-edged. We have to convince the children, and then we also have to talk to the parents. And that brings up a very interesting point about staying on top of the current trends, right? If children are using ChatGPT, we should know how it impacts them. If children are facing a certain kind of a bullying issue through technology, we should know what to do with it, right? And that brings us to the point of facilitation where you have to stay continuously upgraded and continuously on top of things, right? And that brings me to the question with you, right? Being in primary grade, where children are being exposed to so much technology, which is not really healthy for them to actually develop their thinking and their cognition, and having to deal with this world where it is being pushed at them at a velocity that we can't defend. How do you facilitate that challenge? And is there space for the facilitator to continuously learn and upskill themselves on these trends?
Specific learning disability is a real thing. And in that, language difficulties are more seen, sadly, amongst boys more than women, more than girls. Probably because girls are encouraged to speak earlier than boys. So it's all about, when you say facilitation, it's very important that the children are made to speak in the language. English teachers, constant struggle because it's the children aren't, their vocabularies are so poor starting, and of course with having genuine difficulties makes it that much more difficult. So if you want to be a facilitator, you have to create experiences at home or at schools where the children can speak. So collaborative learning, as ma'am brought it up, those kinds of learning, think, pair, share, these kind of learning situations have to be created so that the child can speak his or her mind, whether they have understood a certain topic or whatever. Now, coming to internet challenges, we've had a lot of troubles. We've, especially post-COVID, the dependence on gadgets has also increased. So it's a constant struggle. We don't really know how to. So as and when a problem arises, we try and address the issue. But yes, constantly speaking to parents, the children, explaining to them how AI might, just like many children can say, ma'am, why should I learn the spellings? I just have to type it in Google and I'll get the correct spellings, or spell check. But they don't realize that spell check, even when you type on your phone, you do realize that the wrong word pops up. It's not necessarily the word that you have in mind. So yes, we have to constantly keep teaching, talking to our parents, children, etc. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That's such a valid point, right? That in order to communicate, we need language. And it's the same language that makes us think what we want to communicate. So both, it kind of is and when the cycle breaks, it affects the child's thinking, right? And then they're not able to discern and make decisions. And that's where it is very alarming, because in today's world, it's no longer knowledge-centric or information-centric. It's a decision-centric world that our children are going to go into. And if they are not equipped to make good decisions, which actually facilitation can enable, when you observe, you put in the right kind of provocation, enable collaborative learning, make them think about what are they really thinking and doing through that process, you're basically enabling them to prepare for the future, right? And when technology comes in the way, I want to ask both sides of the story, right? We've talked about the bane side of it. Do you use technology, or do you see technology as being aid, a support, a boon in facilitation? And do you have something to share on that front? Anybody can take it, it's open. Yes, Sandhya.
So yes, we've heard a lot about technology, no screen time, no gadgets. But as somebody said on the panel earlier, it's around us. We cannot avoid it. We have televisions at home. All of us are on our phones, working or for entertainment. So it's always been a challenge. In my generation, it was television. Our parents were always at us for the television. I've even been ticked off for reading, right? So too much of anything is bad. Technology is here to stay, and it can be used as a tool. It's great. Okay, so there's a lot of content available out there for learning purposes. It's about how technology is being used for learning as a platform, or what is available there. And there are a lot of children who are good at technology, and that's the environment we need to be able to provide them. Yes, entertainment, a shorter period or a shorter duration, and a longer period for children who work well with technology is great. Now, again, there the observation is more important, so that you can identify how a child works better. For example, my older son is very traditional, conventional, needs a book in hand to be able to do his work, while my younger one learns better from a screen, even if he is reading. He can switch between. I get confused. I cannot do that. I'm more traditional. And he works better that way. Me trying to change this to go to a conventional way will definitely not work. And he uses the computer or any gadget. It's innately a talent that he has. It's about how much time you spend. So I think it is also a boon, but just like everything else, how much time or how much you use it for what purpose is what is more important. And that's again where a facilitator comes into the picture.
So I absolutely agree with that, and there's definitely no doing away with the technology, because on one side we are, encouraging children with all our vocational courses for AI, and on the other side we say stay away from gadgets. That's not going to happen. And I mean, forget ChatGPT, even Google. Right? We've all Googled. I'm sure many of us would have Googled at least the maps before we came here, right? So we all use it. So why are we trying to set our children back by saying don't use technology? It's just as ma'am said, it's all about moderation and using it with the right prompts for the right things. So that, I think, if we can channelize, and so on, as we heard in the previous panel, we're already into our Gen Alpha, Beta, Gamma. We're all there. So we can't hold them back, and that doesn't make sense. So but for progression, it's just about trying to make sure that they're using it in the right way. So that is where we become facilitators more than that rigid system where I teach and only what I say is the rule. So trying to use that, I think, is absolutely necessary.
Technology has been a real boon, at least in my line, for me, because phonics is one thing that, it's very important for the children to even hear. And so we do use a lot of technology for the children. For this, yes, and sharing of information. I think technology is very vital for this. We get to see if we can somehow make it a way to share information among schools, among students, in a very well monitored, in a sort of in that framework. I'm sure it will really benefit all the children. All the schools would benefit if
I think that's beautiful. Very interesting points emerged, actually. I just want to bring that together, right? One is that the technology is here to stay, right? Anything in our children's world that is here to stay needs to be managed in their lives in ways that is productive and resourceful for them and empowering for them, right? So what is being traditionally pushed to them is consumerism. So you consume content. You are the product at the end of the day, right? Is not very clear to them. They feel they're being entertained, but they are the product, right? So that conversation happening with the child is a facilitator's role, which is what you're saying. That's what both of you were saying, right? How much time do I use? What do I use it for? How do I discern between the information that I'm getting, ranging from fake information to spam that people are doing with me, to all kinds of cyberbullying acts that are being done, right? That discernment cannot just come from knowledge. For a facilitator, you have their heart first. You know the child reaches out to you. So whether it's technology, whether it's AI, whether it's virtual reality, tomorrow it's Neuralink, anything that comes in their lives, it's a facilitator who has the child's heart, who will openly, vulnerably come and share with you that, I have a problem, right? I don't know what to do with this, right? I have been addicted to technology in a certain way. When a parent helplessly sends you a message, which happens many a times, right? My child is shut in their room and is on the device for hours together. I can see the Wi-Fi blinking, right? At that time, it's the facilitator who has access to the child because you lead with empathy, right? And that's the key difference for an educator, to have that skill to facilitate the child, because you're being child-centric. You're not being knowledge-centric. Knowledge happens to be one of the things that the child needs, but they need a lot more. They need mentorship. They need guidance. They need empathy. They need a ear to cry on. They need compassion. All of that is being provided through each one of you as a facilitator. I want to quickly wrap and bring this together and then open this up for questions. This is an interesting example of the Bangalore floods that happened recently, and we all had to shut at a moment's notice, right? And anxiety amongst our children is very real, okay? So they don't know when this kind of situation happens, when COVID happens, when floods happen or drought happens, which happened about 6-8 months ago. Will the school reopen? Will they get to meet their friends? Will life ever resume as normal? will mommy and papa start fighting again? Right? They don't know. Yes, outwardly, many of them will say, yay, school is shut, we can play and all that. But inwardly, there's a lot of anxiety, and that statistics is there, okay? Across the world, 9 out of 1 lakh teenagers commit suicide every year. In India, that statistic is 15 out of 1 lakh, almost 1.5 times. Across the world, 10 to 12% teenagers last year had at least one major depressive episode. 40% parents admitted to their 9 to 17-year-olds being addicted to social media, to gaming, and to all kinds of technology platforms, right? And just like you wouldn't send your child out onto a highway without any preparation and protection, it's the same thing, sending them out onto online without any preparation, any socialization, any understanding of what might happen out there. And children who are already suffering due to lack of vulnerability are very easy praise. Right? And our children are being preyed upon. So what we did was bring in that topic of Bangalore floods when it rains to children to wonder about, to research, and to present to each other and talk about their anxiety, talk about the information they've collected, and what can they do with it, and stay transparent in their entire process with the technology that they're using. Despite this, let me tell you, my brothers and sisters, it is a true effort in keeping them out of technology addiction. And it takes all of us and all of our heads and hearts put together to ensure that they see the light of the way. Right? So hence, educators as facilitation is very, very important. With that, I open the floor out for questions. We can take 2 questions. Shantanu, one question. Okay. Yes, sir. And you can tell whom, or is it open?
The question is, in COVID you used technology, but the technology usage then drastically fell down. But there were some pros to the tech as well, right? And as you were saying, it's there with us and it's going to be there with us. So how did you continue to adapt? What is the best of tech that you would like to adapt?
Good question.
Yeah, to answer that question, we at DPS, we have nearly 7,500 students on board. So during COVID, as you mentioned, we did, use a lot of technology to ensure that, learning doesn't stop. We revamped our ERP systems to ensure that every student can log in, every teacher, no matter the state. So yes, very valid question. Where did all that technology go? But we haven't done away with it, at least at DPS. We still use our online portals for our extended classes, any online classes that we have at different times, for our parent-teacher meetings, and as ma'am mentioned, the flood situation. We're back to it. We're back with our online classes. We've used the portals again. So I think that it need not stop. That just paved the way for us to use an alternate way of teaching. So it is very handy. So all those things that we couldn't do in our regular classrooms, maybe show them a video or, any other extra information. That was fantastic. So the online classes did help us as well, because we were teaching them from a different perspective. And for kids also, it was a different, it was a different setup for them, right? So, and they love to be anonymous and ask that question in between. So yes, children who would feel a little hesitant in class to stand up in front of the crowd and ask would ask you questions during the online class, because it's just their voice being heard. So it did help, and I think absolutely, even all their projects, everything happened online. So I think it's,
it's the same. I'm from Vidyaniketan School, and the same for us as well. There was one new thing that we as teachers discovered was the Jamboard. And we used to use Google Classrooms, and this Jamboard was like a remarkable thing for us, where children could type their understanding of what we are teaching. So we continue to use the same thing at school, the same technology at school now that we have our smart boards and things like that at school to teach. Yeah, we do use those.
Okay, I have a slightly different take, because you are right. Everybody adapted quickly enough during COVID, and those were the ones that strived during the time. and including us, many of us, we got on Zoom, we were doing our meetings online, and children were homeschoolers. Many of us were already, the children were exposed to learning on a platform earlier, not so much, but mostly from abroad, right? And now we have a lot of Indian companies facilitating that part. However, I do think the human connection is very important, and as soon as lockdown opened up, I think for a while also this continued. Many parents told me that my children were learning better on the platform digitally and they wanted to continue. Many of them said, no, online is not working, even from school, is not working for my child. So they were very happy when school opened up. We'll keep that aside. But the other ones who were very happy and wanted to continue, they pulled out of school and continued with the e-learning platform. A year later, not working for them, because on and off, at least that social interaction, there's only so much you can do. Like they said, they're using it as a tool when it is necessary. But learning everything online, the engagement and interaction is not the same as in a classroom. Okay, even when teachers had to adapt suddenly, I will tell you from that angle as well. It's not easy for us to understand what the child is going through, what all distractions are happening there. In a classroom, we can observe and facilitate. Most of us are facilitators. So it's easier to facilitate that way than on a screen. We are distracted because we are at home. Children are also distracted due to many other things. So I think that could be one of the reasons why the number has come down. And that will continue because we've understood the importance of human interactions. AI, everything can come, but we still need experts, which can be fine-tuned only by a human.
Thank you. I think it's very valid what they're saying. The human element cannot be done away with. We did adapt at that time. And what was replaced was the physical classroom became online, right? So a lot of those tools went away. The thing that I want to point out is we are not individual learners. We are embodiments of our social influence, and there's a lot of embodied experience in our learning, so you cannot replace that with just technology. It's never going to happen, right? But what is going to happen is all the tools that have come into play, whether it's Jamboard, it's Mentimeter, it's Quizzes, it's all kinds of things that we've used. It'll continue being used depending on the level of access to technology. Learning management systems, whether it's Google Classroom, we have our own, they have their own ERP, right? Will continue to get used. We additionally use it for tracking empathy at school, comparing that with their scores and their learning patterns. And we are also able to incorporate AI in their thinking routine to put it after their thinking process. But all of those tools need you to be very cognizant of the fact that the children need humanness in their learning, and not just humanness, the environment, the nature, right? The play, all of it is very essential. So it's not going to only come from technology.
Okay, so first of all, thank you, Dr. Shanti, for inviting me to this wonderful event. And I'm going to keep it as quick as possible. This question is basically from the last two panels as well as for this panel as well. Now, when we speak about Gen Z and then moving on to Gen Alpha and Gen Beta, right? One trend which we can see here is the increase in the instant gratification that we have, and also there is an increased level of comfort, right? Be it whichever socioeconomic background we are talking about, as compared to previous two generations, the current generation is having much more comfortable life, and that is going to increase. Now, that leads to a very low tolerance to failure. Now, I think that is where the problem starts. I come from a mental health as well as from corporate background. And I see this generation, they can't accept no for an answer. And this brings me to an example, right? When Australian cricket team, I'm sorry, I'm going out of context here, but when Australian cricket team under Steve Waugh and Ricky Ponting was consistently performing well, the question was asked, like, what's the secret? And they said that we make sure that we pick people in our team who have faced failure and have rebound from that situation. Now, in this situation, like how are we as parents and educators can teach resilience and perseverance, and how to, I'm not saying that we are preparing them for a failure, but also make them realize that failure is also beautiful in its own sense and embrace it in a positive way.
It's a beautiful question. Who wants to take it? Sandhya, yes, let's go.
Thank you for the question. Very important at this stage, right? Oh, okay. So, failure, the word failure, we've all, and we the adults are the facilitators now for the next gen. We've grown up with the word failure to mean something negative, right? So, the vocabulary we use, the manifestation that happens because of that, right? We do tell our children failure is fine, we are there, all of that. However, how many of you as adults, when your child fails, especially when it's your child and not even just you are disappointed. The first emotion that comes across is disappointment. Then you pick yourself up and we say, let me help you through that. It's okay. It's words. The child has seen your disappointment. It's a problem, right, for the child. Then the child next aims not to fail. So I have started using the term, because I also believe that failure is important, is the most important thing in learning. I've started using the term learning experiences instead of failure, which brings it to even the child. Okay, we learned something. This is what happened. How do we move on? Sometimes that failure is just a lesson to you that you're not good at this. Let's move on and do something else. It's still a learning. And I think that, as facilitators, many of you all might be aware, it's about how we, practice what we preach first, and it's not just words. We tend to do that. We do give lectures, but we are unable to do it ourselves. And if we understand that and help ourselves first, we'll be able to facilitate for the children.
One thing I just want to add, 2 years back, you might have noticed one newspaper report came that a surprise school bag check yield condoms, eye pill, even alcohol in water bottle, many such cigarette lighter, many such incident that was reported in the paper. One thing that had, after reading at the end of that news, it was striking that the HM of that school didn't make it a scene, didn't give TC or suspend the students. That HM gave 10 days leave, called the parents and gave 10 days leave to the students and informed parents to take these children out and consult with a good counselor, make them all right and bring them back to the school. So that HM supported not to add many more antisocial elements in the society. That is one way. It is a very matured behavior of emotional intelligence.
Thank you to each one of you for doing this. Thank you for adding that value and for asking that question. I am not the failure. What I did failed. That's all it is, right? And when children walk the path knowing that they have a larger purpose to fulfill in life, smaller milestones, failure will not matter. And that's the love and affection that each educator and facilitator is able to give them. Thank you so much.